On a piano score, there are two sets of 5 lines. One set at the top for the right hand and one set at the bottom for the left hand. The 5 lines at the top represent the 5 notes E, G, B, D and F. And the 5 at the bottom represent the 5 notes G, B, D, F and A. So the conventional way of teaching students how to read notes that land on those lines is to use mnemonics. So they say that the 5 lines in the right hand are E, G, B, D, F. So they say, well, let's use the mnemonic, every good boy deserves food. What? It's quite hard to stretch. And in the left hand, the 5 notes are G, B, D, F, A. So they say, we'll use the mnemonic, good boys deserve food always. Well, then you have the notes in between the lines, because you can have notes on lines or spaces in sheet music notation. And they have mnemonics for those too. So the spaces in the right hand are F, A, C, and E, which just spells face, so that one is easy. And the spaces in the left hand are A, C, E, and G. There they use the mnemonic, all cows eat grass. So what students end up with is 4 mnemonics. You have every good boy deserves food, good boys deserve food always, F-A-C-E, and all cows eat grass. The idea being that when a student sees a note on a page, they plug in the appropriate mnemonic, it tells them what the note is, and they go and play the note on the piano. Well, there are a lot of problems with this technique. The first one is that it forces students to translate everything into note names. Because a note is just a blob on a page. There's no actual note name written there. And a note on a piano is just, a blank button. So what the system is getting students to do is to take something on a page, translate it into a note name, and then translate that note name into a note on the piano. So that is inefficient in itself. It creates this internal monologue which slows the student down. And not only does it create an internal monologue, but it's quite a cumbersome one, because, if you're playing this F, having read it on the page, you're not just saying F to yourself, or even food. You're saying good boys deserve food. And I've seen students who'll do this even when they've been learning piano for, 2, 3, or 5 years. Another problem with the system is that the system tells them, let's say, to play an F, but it doesn't tell them whether to play this F, or this one, or this one, or this one, or in fact any of the other ones on the piano. So students sometimes get mixed up between those two. Also, if you look at the pattern of 5 lines again, you have these 5 in the right hand and these 5 in the left hand. Well, that doesn't remotely cover the whole keyboard. You have all this space up here and these notes down here, which aren't at all accounted for by the system. And these notes aren't just there to look pretty. They really do get used very frequently in music. It's even more notes than you'll be able to see on this video. It's probably half the piano is unaccounted for by this system. So not only is it a bad system, but the moment people start to play real music, the system lets them down and doesn't even tell them how to read notes which are outside of the ones they've learned. So the system I came up with instead is a reference note system. What I do is I teach students to recognize 9 notes very, very rapidly. And then once they've learned those 9 notes, it's extremely easy to read any note in a very large range of the piano. So the 9 notes I teach students are these 5 Cs, and this G and F in the left hand, and this G and F in the right hand. I could have picked different notes as long as they're reasonably evenly spaced on the piano, but it just so happens that those ones fit a particularly easy pattern to remember on the page, which is why I chose them. So if I play these notes again and hold them down, okay, so there are 2 more up here, but I can't reach them. You'll see that no 2 of these notes are further apart than 4 notes apart. So let's take these 2. The thing is, if a student can read this note or this one really rapidly, just see it on the page and play it straight away without having an internal monologue, then if they see a note on the line exactly in between those 2, it has to be this one. That's just a visual intuition. If you know these 2 notes, the one in between has to be this. You don't have to translate into a note name and then translate that into a note on the piano. So even though I'm using note names to teach those original reference notes, and it's only 3 note names, it's just C, F, and G. Beyond that, you don't have to think about note names at all to make the system work. And there's another huge advantage to this system, which is a musical one. Because the other system is so cumbersome on people's working memory, the usual way that students are taught is they're just taught the middle notes to begin with. So they'll learn the mnemonics, but all of the pieces they play to start with will have their hands in the center of the piano. So they'll play tunes like and they'll do that for quite some time. After a while, the left hand will maybe move further down, so then they'll play pieces like this. And so on. And slowly by slowly, the hands will move further out on the piano until the idea is that they're then able to read all of these notes, although frequently that doesn't even work. So what happens then is that, first of all, they're much weaker at reading high and low notes than they are reading notes in the middle of the piano, because they spend less time practicing these ones than they have with these ones. Whereas in my system, I'll teach students all of these notes straight away, really covering this area of the piano. And no part of that is easier or harder than the rest. And the second huge advantage to this is that instead of playing pieces like you can start students playing pieces like because you can put their left hand right the way down here from the start. You don't need to work slowly towards it. And that sounds much better than that really sounds like beginner piano. But in fact, you can have beginners playing like this from the very start. So it's much more motivating to students to get sight reading out of the way within the first couple of lessons, and then let them play really rich sounding pieces from the beginning.